Hello, everyone, and it is now time to kickstart our first session for the Economic Times Phoenix CXO Summit APAC 2022. The opening keynote by Sanyin Siang on the topic Transformational Leadership for the Next New. Digital disruption is making organizations undergo a plethora of changes with the demand for continuous innovation to stay relevant. To sail through the challenges, leaders need to inspire and motivate teams for bringing positive transformation in the business. In our opening keynote, Sanyin Siang, Thinkers 50 #1 executive coach, author, advisor for Google Ventures and Duke University, will share some in-depth insights on how you can adopt transformational leadership for preparing your business for the next new. Some of the key takeaways from the session would include: you can understand why transformational leadership is important for business success, what are the key elements of transformational leadership, and how can technology play an important role to support leaders in the virtual world. Sanyin is an investor and advisor to tech founders, VCs, boards, sports industry executives, and Fortune 500 CEOs, bringing in expertise in culture, leadership growth, and team cohesion, as well as a diverse network of influencers. Recognized by Thinkers 50, the premier global ranking of management thinkers, as the world's most influential coach and mentor, Sanyin coaches C-suite teams and develops enterprise leadership programs to unleash human capital and tap unseen potential to thrive in an exponentially changing world. She also has a deep love for working with students, sharing with them insights on what it takes to succeed at the different levels of one's career progression and cultivating their innate and distinctive strengths. Sanyin is also the founding executive director of Duke University's Coach K Leadership and Ethics Center at its Fuqua School of Business. The center regularly convenes think tanks to explore cutting-edge issues and is also a leadership laboratory that helps in a baseline leadership experience for every daytime MBA student. Drawing on a science and engineering background, Sanyin is also an adjunct associate professor with Duke's Pratt School of Engineering and a senior fellow with Duke Divinity School's Ormond Center, sharing her insights for their work on building thriving communities. Also a globally recognized thought leader, she shares insights with her LinkedIn following of more than 1 million and was named as LinkedIn Top Global Influencer Voices in both 2017 and 18. She authored the award-winning book called The Launch Book, which gives readers an action plan for leveraging change using behavioral science concepts. And as a speaker, she has addressed audiences from the White House, 2 military officers, Fortune 500 companies, and CHROs. She's also the host of the Global Sports Owners and CEO Summit Series, Conversations with Legends. So without any further delay, let me invite our opening keynote speaker, Sanyin, to deliver her address to us. Over to you, Sanyin, and thank you so much for joining us for this session.
Oh, thank you so much for that incredibly generous and kind introduction. And so now, here's all you really need to know about me for all of you listening out there. Hi, fellow human beings. I'm Sanyin Siang, and my mission in life is to enable greatness in others. And that shows up as an educator, as a mom, as a coach, as an author. And in doing all that means is I've just been lucky to have these incredible platforms to be able to allow me to continue on in this mission of enabling others and enabling greatness. And so thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. So as I reflect back on the past few months, and when I talk with the CEOs whom I work with, several trends keep coming up. And I think you might see these too in your organizations. So one is a majority of people who have been with you in the last quarter, maybe as high as 20 to 40%, were not with you at the start of the previous quarter. That's how fast our talent is turning in our organizations. That's how fast our organizations are growing. And that's incredible. Another major set of trends is the new challenges that we're facing. I mean, we are seeing things such as supply chain challenges that we haven't thought about before. That's forcing us to think about, well, should we imagine going back to a just-in-time type of strategy, or should we be planning for a scenario where we need a just-in-case type of strategy? We're also dealing with unprecedented competitors because we're now in an ecosystem type of world where it's not only about industries that are adjacent to us that may have an impact on what we do, but it's also about industries that are maybe 2 or 3 orders away from us. A great example of this, to illustrate the complexity, is shared by my friend Rob Nail, who ran Singularity University. And something Rob posed is, if you are an energy drink company, imagine that, what would be one of the greatest threats or greatest disruptors to you going forward, to your industry? And if you say other competitors, other energy drink companies, yes, those are traditional type of answers and so very true. But the answer that Rob posed after his team had done some research on this is self-driving cars. Wait, what? The automobile industry is now a potential threat to the energy drink industry? Well, when you think about it, the time that people consume energy drinks is when they're going on long drives. So self-driving cars can change that equation massively. And so new competitors, new supply chain challenges, new talent expectations and evolution. And then on top of all of that, as a driver and also as a consequence, technology is causing us to rethink everything that we do. So what this means is we can no longer do things the same way that we've done them before. Rapid change, accelerated growth. And so here's one wonderful thing to hold on to. As much as the context in which we lead has evolved so much over the past decade, forget the past decade, the past year, or even the past month, the core of what makes us human and the governing dynamics of these human relationships have surprisingly stood the test of time. So here, the topic for today is transformational leadership for the next new, how you can adopt transformational leadership for preparing your business for the future. Well, one of the big answers is it's about being human. So we'll dive into that. So here's the playbook for today. Instead of a traditional keynote, I like to do what we call a heart note. So it's low tech, no PowerPoint, and we'll engage with each other in the following way. Imagine you're one of my coaching clients, and you're a student or a faculty colleague, and you just walked into my office, and for a question that you have, and we'll just engage in a somewhat of a conversation. And so for the first 20 minutes, I'll share a few key ideas as a grist for conversation. And then later on, we'll have this lovely exchange through Q&A. All right. So as a bit of context to give you a frame of reference for where I'm coming from, in my work as a coach and educator and head of a leadership center, I have this horizontal vantage point. I work with CEOs, military generals, board directors, entrepreneurs across public, private, social sectors. And it's precisely the diversity and plurality of these relationships that gives me an insight into the patterns of effective leadership. And so on the surface, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CEO of a startup that's transforming robotics, or a Nobel laureate who runs a research lab, may seem to lead very different types of organizations. The levers that they lean on are surprisingly similar. And they're similar enough to draw analogies. And of course, there's also nuanced differences. And then the other population that I have the joy of working with are the next generation. These are undergraduates and MBA students who are at the start of their careers. And what I'm getting from them is the sense of their career and leadership progression. So these are your larger talent force, right? So beyond this horizontal view, I'm also getting this longitudinal view. And so that's the frame of reference from which I'm coming from. So now, imagine you're in my office and you just ask the question, gosh, digital disruption is making us all having to change and innovate. How do we inspire and motivate our teams to bring positive transformation into the business? And here's what I would do. I would turn around and I'll ask you, think back to when you've done something really tough in your career. Then something that requires you to do something either entirely new or to unlearn what you know and learn something different in its place. It's doing something old differently. So think back to that. Now, I know embracing change is hard. Transformation is really hard. If it were easy, we will all be doing it. And so here's my question for you. When you think back to that time, and it could be yesterday, or it could be a year or 10 years ago, what made it hard? What made that change hard? And then the next question is, what gave you the courage? What gave you the courage? And then who inspired the belief that you can actually do it, that you can actually surmount the obstacles? Let me just pause and give you a moment to reflect on that. All right. So I would posit that when it comes to those obstacles, what made it hard, they had something to do with fear, right? They have to do with these emotions and maybe a conflicting sense of loyalty. It might have to do with the fear that you might fail. It has to do with the fear that, oh, letting go of what made you an expert at what you do, that's really hard. But in order to take on a new role, a new change, you have to overcome that fear and reimagine what you're capable of, what you're possible of. Now, your answer to what gave you the courage, if we were going to take all of your answers and really look at where are some of the patterns, I would say one of the things that give you courage is purpose. It's the purpose behind why that change, why you have to embrace that change, why you need to transform. It's the purpose. It's also the people around you. It might even be your motivations. Like if you aren't changing or transforming, think of the alternative, right? And is the alternative something you're willing to live with for the people that you love, for the colleagues that you're working with, that you're leading, right? So that courage, being able to overcome those fears and those emotions, purpose, and the people around us. Now, if I were going to ask you who or what gave you the belief that you can do it, I think the person that you named or the people that you named, they might be a boss, it might be a mentor, it might be a colleague, a friend, it might even be a family member, it might be your spouse. At the end of the day, it's someone whom we trust because they know and see the possibilities in ourselves that we have not yet seen, right? So let's take all of that and turn it around. You have to inspire your people to transform and change. If those were the things that enabled you during a really tough time to do that, it's going to be the similar things that enable your people to do that during this really changing and uncertain times. And leadership is necessary because at the end of the day, it's people, not technology, that are the most powerful assets in our organizations. It's our imaginations and hearts that are the true sources of this competitive advantage. And leadership is really about unleashing human possibilities. So take, for example, a year ago, nearly a year ago, Perseverance is the Mars rover. Had traveled more than 300 million miles through space to arrive on Mars. And that rover's touchdown on this planet was this amazing feat of science, and even more so, teamwork and leadership that spanned years of research and work. And when we're watching it in NASA's control room, there may have been 50 people at the time of the landing, but we know that feat was possible because of thousands of scientists and engineers from across different disciplines, countries and organizations around the world. And they're cheering because it was the wild success of we thought something might have been possible. We weren't sure whether it was possible, but we as people, we came together and we brought our collective energies and gifts and talents to the forefront, and it happened. And Adam Steltzner, who was NASA's chief engineer for Perseverance, noted in his book, that Right Kind of Crazy, that this isn't one single person doing the lion's share of the work. This was actually about teams, and it required 100% cooperation and collaboration. And so at the end of the day, the technology was powered by people, and it wasn't by individuals. It was about individuals working interdependently as teams, right? So as it was with that Mars rover, and as it is with you personally in your careers, and with you in leading your teams, it all comes down to people. So I want to give you some ideas to think about. We can talk about so many other things, that's people and talent strategies, but in the time period that we have, I want to focus on just a few ideas that you can take and activate. So one thing to think about is really about emotions. Where I talk about people, we do things, we're not robots. We have emotions. We have emotions. So as leaders, we have to think about the emotional connectivity, because that's what fosters relationships. We also have to think about the emotional obstacles and the emotional drivers, and recognize that emotions are part of the challenge right now. In behavioral science, we know that it's really emotions, not data, that drive behaviors. That's why stories and narratives matter, because stories are data put into a context that's emotionally resonant. And accounting for that emotion, if you take stock of your current emotion right now, you may feel tired, anxious, outraged, frustrated, grateful, joyful. Did I mention tired? Or even you might be experiencing emotions that you haven't put a name to. That's okay. But we have to acknowledge that. And I know, knowing this group, because I work with your peers every single day, we're all also experiencing decision fatigue. And so that means even the smallest actions feel so exhausting. The smallest decisions feel so exhausting. So if we're going to think about transformational leadership, we actually have to acknowledge the emotions and understand that this is something we also have to account for in our planning and in our thinking. And a big part of this, which will lead to one of the answers later on, is that a big part of the reason why we feel this way is that the pandemic of the last 2 years have accelerated blurring of the lines between domains and boundaries, right? So we no longer have this luxury of compartmentalization, silos. And at the personal levels, we're now in a different relationship between our work and life. All of your people now have a different relationship between their work and life. You're in my home. Look at this. I'm in your homes. We've seen probably each other's kids and puppies, and hear the clang of the everyday life that's going on, the everyday rhythm. So there's no longer any work life. Hey, it's just life. And recognizing that and embracing this whole human being. This is a radical departure from our industrial age type of organizational model that says, hey, we have to compartmentalize. But rather today, we have to show up and allow others to show up more as their whole selves at work. And what matters in our people's lives actually has an impact on how they show up in the workplace, right? So given that, here's an idea for you. Take the time to get to know your people. Now, you may think, well, how do we do that? The specific action I would like you to think about, especially in the age of remote or hybrid work, where we're talking to each other through technology and screens, is to think about the idea of the chit chat, or what I call the agendaless conversation. So pre-pandemic, when we're able to meet in person, think about the times when we really get to reveal bits and pieces of ourselves and see bits and pieces of the other person. It may be chatting about their children going off to university, or it may be chatting about a new favorite restaurant that we just discovered and a dish that we love. Those type of conversations happen not in meeting, but actually outside of meetings. It may be while we're waiting in line for that meeting. It might be while we are bumping to a colleague in the hallways. And that type of agendaless conversation or chit chat is what enables us to see the interpersonal, the human being in each other. But in the digital age that we're in the world of Zoom and hybrid work, when we think about scheduling that Zoom and hopping on that Zoom, immediately we jump into an agenda. Step back and think about one, all right, so you're leading a Zoom meeting. Before that Zoom meeting, just take 5 minutes to share something that inspires you. It could be talking about a new recipe that you just learned, or you can talk about, or asking your people about how was their weekend, or what plans do they have coming up for the new year. Something that seems so completely out of agenda, but will have such a great impact, right? And then also the other idea, besides in meeting, is when you're having your one-on-ones, think about sometimes 15 minutes of just asking about what's happening in their lives. Now, this requires a bit of trust building for them to be vulnerable and sharing that. So you have to go first. You have to be vulnerable and share that. Open up your world, open up your life, right? And it's about being human with each other. I've seen the effects of this when teams are more human with each other. That's when they can really cohese and accelerate and have the type of resiliency that enables them to surmount any challenges. In fact, in MIT, there's a study on how the most effective teams interact in informal ways as well, have high numbers of informal interactions. You can shape that into this digital work environment through those two actions that I talked about. So what other actions have you noticed that might have worked? Let's talk about them in the Q&A, because I'm curious to know. There's no playbook anymore. We're making up our playbook as we go along. And then the other idea is this idea of rethinking our narrative of meritocracy. So we're taught that we can achieve anything through hard work. Now, that's true, right? We all have to work hard. But that sort of narrative forces us to think more about production value rather than inherent value. And we need a narrative in this age where we don't know what we might need from a person, and we don't know what a person might be able to offer because of all the changes that are constantly happening. So we needed this narrative of implicit human value in the workplace. What would be possible if we truly saw our employees as human beings rather than human capital? And rather than ask when someone comes in and think in our minds, how are they valuable? Or with a new employee, they have to prove that they have value. What if we reshift that and assume everyone has something to contribute, and it's just a matter of unlocking potential. It's a matter of unlocking potential rather than finding it. Because at the end of the day, I think we underestimate people. And this narrative of production value rather than inherent value limits our imagination about what our people can be and do. So we have to choose new narratives, right? So a key actionable idea for that is, don't think about, traditionally when you're in a leadership position, we think about ourselves as enacting the captains of a sports team, laying out the plays and executing to them. But in today's world, it's really also about being not the captain, but the coach for the team. Because there's not a playbook that you can enact that was pre-existing. That's gone. You have to be the coach that co-creates that new playbook with your teams. So it's less about you producing and more about you taking the time to coach and mentor them, right? To really see, I'm noticing this person is really energized. Now, think outside of their roles. This person is really energized when they do X, Y, or Z. Or, hey, this person, when they enter into a room and enter into a conversation, somehow the entire conversation just shifts and there's a stepwise leap. Why is that? Maybe this person has the relationship type of superpowers or catalytic superpowers that are actually so key for our team to really operate in a more impactful way. And that's how we can scale. So think about yourself as a coach for your team. And that's, we can have a longer conversation around that, how you can be a leader coach of your team, rather than just someone in the leadership position. So in conclusion, when we think about it, technology has been more integral to our lives than it's ever been. And whether it's augmenting our communications or breaking down geographical barriers, hey, we're talking to each other and you're halfway across the world and I'm in Durham, North Carolina. That's miraculous. That's wonderful. And technology has been able to facilitate access to education and healthcare, or creating the time and space for us to enjoy and engage in joyful pursuits. I've done more baking than you can imagine over the last 2 years than I have done in my entire lifetime. And at the end of the day, the goal, it's not that the goal is for human beings to help technological progress. Technological disruption and progress is to help human beings. And so in order to develop and leverage digital technology's powers and to enable it to that disruption to be positive disruption rather than negative disruption, we really need to double down on what makes us human. And that starts with us. It starts with a one-on-one between us and our people, but with each other. We need to clear our heads and imagine a new world, one in which what is possible is decidedly human. And that's how we can transform for the new. That's how we can create sustainable, consistent wins going forward in the future. Thank you so much.
Wow, Sanyin, thank you so much. That was such an inspirational and insightful session. There could not have been a better way to kickstart our summit, which is about transforming businesses for the future and the role leaders will play in it. You very rightly pointed out that leaders who are authentic will be the ones who will lead this change and become transformational leaders. In the end, it is all about being human and reaching out and connecting with your people. And as you so beautifully said, I especially love the point on being the captain, not being the captain, but the coach for your team. And finally, when you said technological progress is to help human beings and not the other way around. Very, very beautifully put. Thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing such inspirational notes with us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And there's so much more to learn from you, and I'm sure our audience will concur and will have a lot of questions for you. So for our audience, we will now have a live Q&A session with Sanyin in track 2 of the conference. Do join us there and ask Sanyin questions that you have been seeking answers to. And once again, thank you for joining us, everyone. We have some engaging sessions planned for you all through the day and also tomorrow. So stay with us, experience the sessions, and enhance your learning. And coming up now is our CEO mega panel on leading the recovery in 2022. See you all there. Thank you once again.